Title: The Last Field, A Farmer's Stand Against the Storm. In the heart of a quiet countryside, where the wind whispers through rows of corn and the sun rises with quiet promise each day, lived a man whose story few knew, but all would come to respect. This is not a tale of instant success or grand inheritance. It is a story of loss, of mud-caked boots and hands worn rough by the earth. This is the story of Elijah Brooks, a simple farmer who refused to let the land forget him, no matter how cruel the seasons became. Elijah Brooks was born on a patch of soil that barely remembered prosperity. His family had farmed it for generations, scraping life from its clay-rich dirt in the small town of Kellen Hollow. When his father passed, Elijah was barely 20 and left with debts, dying crops, and a rickety old tractor that coughed more than it roared. The first year he ran the farm alone, a drought came. Weeks stretched into months without a single drop of rain. His corn shriveled under the unrelenting sun, and his livestock grew gaunt. By autumn, Elijah had harvested less than a third of what he needed to break even. Neighbors whispered, "He should sell. Cut his losses. That land's cursed." But Elijah only nodded silently and kept working. The next year brought floods. Rains fell for days without rest, drowning his hopes in muddy fields. Seeds rotted before they could sprout. The barn, which he had patched with his own hands, collapsed in the storm. Still, he didn't leave. "Why don't you go?" asked Clara, the young teacher from town who often brought supplies. Elijah smiled, his voice calm. "Because this land is mine, not just on paper. It remembers my father's steps, my mother's laughter. It's part of me." Clara didn't understand, but she admired his resolve. As seasons passed, so did the disasters. One year it was locusts, the next an unexpected frost in early spring. Elijah, already poor, grew thinner, but his eyes stayed sharp, and each time he fell, he got back up. He started reading, books from the town library, articles online, when he managed to get to the community center's only working computer. He studied soil regeneration, permaculture, and irrigation systems used in drought-stricken countries. He built a rainwater collection system with salvaged barrels. He rotated his crops, introduced nitrogen-fixing plants like legumes, and began composting everything he could. It wasn't instant success, but slowly, the land responded. One spring, his tomatoes didn't die. The next, his beans came up strong and green. People noticed. At the farmer's market, where Elijah once stood with a half-empty crate, now others waited in line for his produce. He shared his methods freely. "It's not magic," he'd say, "just respect for the land, for the seasons, and for yourself." But challenges didn't stop. A wildfire, fanned by record heat, came terrifyingly close one year. Elijah had built fire breaks after reading about them in a sustainability guide. They worked, barely. The edge of his land bore black scars, but his fields stood untouched. The local paper ran a story, "The Farmer Who Stayed." They called him resilient. Some called him foolish. But Elijah didn't care about labels. He only cared that his land was alive, and that he was too. Clara, now the principal of the town school, often invited him to speak to the students. "What made you stay when everything went wrong?" one curious boy once asked. Elijah looked out the window, where young trees he had planted now danced in the breeze. "Because quitting never grew anything," he said. "But staying gave life a chance." In time, Elijah helped others adapt. He showed neighbors how to compost, how to plant cover crops. He gave away seeds. When a storm destroyed a nearby farm's fence, he was the first to show up with tools and a quiet smile. His farm wasn't big, it wasn't flashy, but it was thriving, not in wealth, but in harmony. Years later, when his hair had gone gray and his hands shook a little from age, Elijah stood at the edge of his field, watching his nephew plant rows of spinach in the tilled earth. He knew then it had all been worth it. He had not only saved his land, he had taught it to survive. And in doing so, he had taught others the same. Conclusion. Thank you for listening.